Hello everybody and welcome to a little bit of gaming news and comment. Two stories today that I thought were quite interesting. One, Titanfall cuts Capture the Flag and Pilot Hunter game modes from the roster on the PC platform, which I thought was quite interesting. Mostly because of the way people have responded to it. In other words, for example in this Rock Paper Shotgun article, the writer of this article, Graham Smith, has said that they've removed the main thing I liked from a game which costs via EA's Origin £45. Which I think is a valid argument to make. So he's then quoted immediately next to it, the explanation for the decision, which I'm just going to quote verbatim. Yesterday we removed Capture the Flag and Pilot Hunter as separate playlists in the PC version of Titanfall. Capture the Flag and Pilot Hunter have not been widely used models on the PC version. Players trying to access these modes had overlong wait times to find other users, and it was making for a poor experience. We want to make sure that not only is there compelling content in the playlists we offer, but that the experience of joining a match works well. We are tracking what playlists players are choosing, and will continue to look at unpopular playlists and add new ones on both platforms. We will still rotate Pilot Hunter and Capture the Flag in for future playlists, as well as adding new riffs on game types that Respawn is currently working on. So, based on my experience on Titanfall, what they've said there is spot on. Capture the Flag and Pilot Hunter were the games that had the longest wait times for a lobby, and it's not because of some weird conspiratorial server lag or anything like that. It's because it just had the fewest number of people playing the game mode. Now, quite frankly, what EA have had a habit of doing is when there's not that many people playing a part of the game, they just shut down the entire fucking servers for everything en masse. So let's just fucking cross our fingers and hope that if one of the other game modes drops a little bit by like 5%, we don't lose fucking Titanfall as a whole. But yeah, this is exactly what I would expect to see. Like, if they've got a matchmaking system in place that costs them money to run. So if nobody's using it, what's the point in having a system just for that? They've not removed it entirely. You can still play Capture the Flag. You can still play Pilot Hunter. How difficult it will be to get those matches, I'm not 100% sure. I haven't played Titanfall in a while, but if not a lot of people were playing it anyway, I actually don't see too much of an issue with it. So let's go down further in the article, see if he actually brings up anything than just, but I paid money for it and I'm in the minority of customers and they're not catering to me, which I think is a little bit of a strange argument to be made, because of course it is a multiplayer game, meaning yes, you put £45 down, but the game still exists, the core function of the game still exists. You do, however, have to play with other people. And so, to say, oh well, the game isn't specifically catering to my £45, even though I think £45 is quite a lot for Titanfall. £35, £40 I think is probably more its range, especially when it didn't come out with a large variety of things. It did come out with a lot of maps. I will give it, it came out with a lot of maps. However, most of the maps tended to basically end up the same way, where you can basically find like the 3 zones where people will fight. So you've got big circular landing pad, big circular like arena of cliffs, big circular arena of buildings, big circular. It just, everything comes down to just fighting in these large open areas that are just sort of blockaded off by different themed buildings, which is kind of interesting but defeats the purpose of there being like 18 maps if you can only play 12 of them in any one game mode, and 11 of the 12 of them play exactly the same. not being able to play my favourite game mode at all is not a better experience than having to wait 5 minutes to find a match. Correct. However, what that will do is drive people to play the already existing popular game modes, which will then, make those matches quicker. You're more likely to get people that have, like a lower ping because there's more people in the pool to choose from, which will increase the quality of the experience in those game modes, which means you might find yourself enjoying them more. So, even if Respawn and EA disagree, doesn't paying for the game mean players should be able to make that decision for themselves? No. What if the game did not have capture the flag in it when you bought it? You wouldn't have that decision for yourself. Does that mean that you would be demanding capture the flag? Maybe. But if anybody is in a position to crunch the numbers and make the decision for other people, it's Respawn and EA. Like, this is a scenario where I don't think as a consumer we have the ability to say, oh, but we know better because we do this. They do that for a fucking living. Like, that is what they are doing for their job right now, is looking at the numbers to find out where that sort of shit goes. Is it worth us having this many people? How many people? How long are these game times? You can say as much as you like that waiting 5 minutes for a match is better than not having it at all, because at least you're making the decision. It's something that you want, but I've seen Saw films where they've decided that having my eye plucked out with a knife is better than dying. They're probably right, but you shouldn't be needing to make that decision at all. So, I think really wording it like that is a little bit of does the whole article a little bit of a disservice, because really, once you start nitpicking for like little tiny pieces of ground like that, you kind of admit you're on the losing side. Like, if it was taking 5 minutes to find a match, nobody's gonna play it. Multiplayer games become the rich get richer kind of scenario. The more popular a game is, the more popular a specific game or game mode is, the more people will jump on it, because the more people there are with a similar ping, because there's a larger pool of people to choose from, which increases the quality of that gaming experience for that game, which makes that game mode even more appealing than it already was to the people that found that game mode appealing. Like, imagine you were in a deathmatch you had 10 people across the entire world playing deathmatch. So you've got the dude from China, the dude from Russia, 3 dudes in the United States, 2 dudes from Europe, and 1 guy in the US, and if that doesn't add up, just fill in the gaps with any other people. The pings are going to be everywhere. It's going to be atrocious. It's going to be a fucking lag horror fest. If you have 2 million people playing that deathmatch, you're going to be fighting. You're probably going to be put up against, like, you, Danny down the road, Greg, maybe he's from, a couple towns over, I don't know, Bashir, who's, maybe in the next town or city over. Like, you're going to be relatively local. Maybe there's a couple French guys in there, but they've got high-speed internet, so it doesn't really matter all that much. They have an extra 5 milliseconds on their ping. Boo-boo-hoo. Like, it's going to massively increase the quality of that experience. And when you're talking about a game that sold millions of copies, and you're talking about thousands of people that were playing Capture the Flag, and they're putting the money down for you to play that game, I wish I could say that, gamers should be able to make that decision for themselves. However, the issue is they have made that decision for themselves, and they've said, as a whole, as an entity, people who play Titanfall have basically voted with their time and said that Capture the Flag, And so I think that's another issue with phrasing the question like that. Doesn't paying for the game mean players should be able to make that decision for themselves? They bought the game, Capture the Flag was in the game, and they didn't fucking play it. They didn't play it. The majority of people weren't playing it. To the point where it takes 5 minutes to find... 5 minutes! I've played faster Titanfall. Like, 60% of the Titanfall games that I've played were over in 5 minutes. Like, not necessarily finished, but like you've gotten to that point where your team has the significant point advantage that basically says they can't win by this point. Or maybe there's that, you get like some good games where there's some back and forth, maybe there's a comeback, it's really interesting, but for the majority of the time, when you've got a time limit that's about 12 minutes or 15 minutes, games are going to be over in about half that time. So, I think it's a little bit weird. Let's see if he's got any more points. The thought that Capture the Flag might one day rotate back into the options is cold comfort. Especially when currently, in place of Capture the Flag and Pilot Hunter, you'll find 2 new modes, Expedition Variety and Expedition Attrition. One of those 2 new game modes which use maps that require you to buy the newly released Expedition DLC. That'll cost you £8 via Origin, or £20 for the Season Pass, which also nets you whatever they're planning to add next. Lamentably hamstrung by many of the trappings of modern multiplayer shooters, you couldn't select what map you wanted to play. There was no server browser, no dedicated servers, no clan infrastructure. Clan infrastructure, as far as I'm concerned, is the fucking worst. It's the least of your issues. You can get a party going before you jump into a game. There is no need to have clan infrastructure there. And no mod support. I think it's a little bit issue to justify that argument. There's no mod support in a multiplayer-only title that does not allow for private matches. You can argue, and I think it's perfectly reasonable argument to make, that you should have private matches, especially when the game is multiplayer only, especially because, first-person shooters, very popular, especially when you've got large groups of people. It would be very easy to fill up a private match with a legit system in a legitimate manner with, some friends. Maybe you do have a clan that you play with other games, maybe you've got a gaming group, or maybe a part of a gaming forum, or some kind of, angry cabal that insist that, playing Ruse enough will give them the experience they need to take over the world. But yeah, I actually don't think very many of the arguments here hold a lot of water. I just think that this article would have been better served, perhaps, with that last couple of paragraphs where basically it points forward to saying, look, they're taking away game modes that I think harms the overall roster more than it helps at this point, because there is a significant lack of game modes in there, and then also points out the problem with removing half of the game modes to replace them with game modes that require DLC. I think that's a very good point as well. And I think that perhaps could have been done with more than a 3 and a bit line paragraph, when most of the article just seems to be bitching about problems with the game's sort of launch. Like, Respawn have added private matches which are still in beta and taking away the only game mode I still wanted to play. It's hugely disappointing. Correct, but I think you spent too much of your time complaining about Capture the Flag being taken away from a my experience of the game perspective, and I think it could have been done a lot more effectively if you concentrated on the what's replacing it aspect. Because I think the fact that it's been taken out of the roster in and of itself is not a bad thing. Replacing it, but when you frame it in the light of replacing half of your roster with DLC-only lists, then you've got a point. You've got a very good point. Because what you're effectively saying is that, look, EA is putting out this message of, we are going to take away the game modes that you can play with the base game and start potentially replacing them with game modes that require DLC. And so it's either pay up for more content that's very cheap to make, very cheap to introduce, or piss off. Like, unless you're willing to spend £85 on Titanfall, piss off. And that's effectively the message that they're sending. If he wants to say that, say that. I think that's a much stronger message and would have been a better article than reading about how you're lamenting over a game mode nobody was playing and you would have struggled to get a game going anyway. It seems a very defeatist to yeah, we got the bus back that goes to the place I never go to. demanding that my bus, sets up an entire bus route and hires a bus driver to effectively ferry just me and somebody else 2 towns over. The price of the fuel, the price of the price of the bus driver means even if you could get them to agree with that, just the fact nobody's on there, it's going to be such a low priority that it's never going to come by anyway. To demand that they try any more than that is just ridiculous. It's not really in their business interests. And also, we as gamers, we as people in the community of people who like to play games, keep bitching about how EA keep shutting down servers because some of the game modes, weren't being utilized instead of downsizing their servers. And the other thing we bitch about them is overinflating their budgets. Well, here they are cutting their budgets in a way that only affects the people who weren't really getting serviced anyway after the people who played the game have made the decision that the game mode wasn't worth playing. Come on, we've got to move past that. I think maybe I'm, almost lambasting him, relatively, because he's probably just I'm kind of disappointed, and I'm sitting there going, how dare you be disappointed? The numbers, man! The numbers! But, no, I just think, displayed it a little bit incorrectly. That's Skype. I think it could have been better served perhaps just being a little bit more passive than bringing it up 6 times in the bloody article. Well, not 6 times, but it's definitely every 3rd paragraph or something. He mentions it in the 1st, the 7th and the 9th paragraph or something. He just keeps bringing it up. Next, Good Old Games is looking into its own version of early access. So, this again, another Rock Paper Shotgun article, this one by Nathan Grayson, which was actually released yesterday. So Good Old Games have decided that they are looking into the idea of introducing a early access style of selling games, which I actually don't think is too bad, because I think for the most part early access, or the theory of early access, is actually really, really good, because a lot of those little indie games I look at and I just go, this game could have been so much better if they just had some more time. And I'm like, well, if they'd gotten a little bit of money from people who enjoyed the game and liked the idea and liked that vision of what that person was trying to build, if they had that way of giving them in a secure fashion some money that allowed them to perhaps, take some of the time off work or even work on it full time to build the game up to be a good game, I actually think that's a very good idea. That's an incredibly good idea. In theory. In practice, we've seen on Steam, however, that it's just rampant bollocks. Rampant bollocks, because anybody apparently can put a game on early access, regardless of how early it is. In fact, early access could be, it'll be released in a week, or it'll be released in, 2065. It could be nowhere near release. It could be so early in its development that it could just never be done. And as we've seen from, is it Towns that just went, yeah, we're not going to work on this anymore? That is a very bad precedent to set. Do those guys, if they were buying it because it said that they were going to be worked on further in the future, are they entitled to a refund? As far as I'm concerned, they are. They bought it under a promise that's not being fulfilled. That sale is a contract. If any one of the terms of a contract is broken, then the whole contract is effectively null and void. In almost every case. If I buy a shirt and one of the buttons comes off, I can get that traded in, I can get that sent back, I can get a refund. Doesn't matter if the shirt still functions as a shirt, the button's broken. That brings into question everything else in the shirt. So, and rightly so, it's broken. Normally shops will say, well, first you might have to go in, we'll give you a different one. If it's definitely to do with the quality of the shirts that have been produced, then we'll give you a thing. Or they'll say, oh, well, you've got to bring it in with a certain date, or you've got to bring proof of receipt. There's some kind of regulation involved to make sure that people can't just go, I bought this shirt and it was bollocks, even though I worn it 5 times. That's completely fine. You're free to do that. You're free to enforce reasonable limitations to ensure that people can't just effectively spam the system, like buy a game, download it, play it, and then get a refund. Like, I think that's perfectly reasonable because, you know, they've used it, they've gotten what they wanted out of it. There may well be actually nothing wrong with their system or the game. So if you want to put some common sense practices in there, that's fine. I'm completely in favour of that. Completely in favour of that. However, I think Steam does a lot of things too far to the point where I just go, they're being lazy. They're just taking the lazy route to getting money. Like, they're just going, alright, let's just throw all of the games up, and then someone will buy one of them. Like, and it's a very, very bad way of doing business, because what they've effectively done now is got themselves cornered to the point where people are now calling into question almost like that one little button that didn't really matter, but that called into question the integrity and the build quality of an entire shirt. People are looking at early access. People are looking at the fact that they changed the new releases to the top sellers. People are looking at the amount of pre-order bonuses that are coming up in Steam more and more often. People are looking at all of these little tiny changes that Steam have made that are effectively being lazy. Another one is the amount of really old games that barely work that have been added onto Steam. One of the prime examples that I find is, I'm pretty sure it's Clans, a game that was released in the 90s, where in order to have the audio, you need to you need to go into the game directory and burn a CD of all the game music, and then put it in a CD drive. A piece of technology that for a lot of PC gamers is entirely obsolete now. Who uses CDs? Very few people use CDs nowadays, at least on their gaming machines, especially when you've got people like Good Old Games, Green Man Gaming, Steam. What do all these things have? CD keys, whatever you want to, wherever you buy your games from, even if you torrent them, what's the one thing they have in common? None of them use discs. So you've got a lot of things that are like, things that individually we'd probably all laugh at, and we do laugh at Steam for, but we'd probably laugh to ourselves and go, haha, Steam, aren't they doing that silly thing? They've gotten themselves too deep in there. They should probably dig themselves out of it. And now everyone's going, Steam's becoming incredibly bloated. Steam are doing some really weird things. Plural. How many good things are there? In comparison, not as many. The individual good things, of course, would probably outweigh any individual bad thing, but they're getting to the point where it's so en masse that Steam has just become bloated with a mess of horseshite. And so it becomes very, very difficult for people to legitimately go on to early access, to the point where they've got to say, it's on early access, but this one's worth it. Like, not because it's a game, and some games are inherently just not very good because of a specific design decision, but people have to tell you that it's a good game, but also worth your early access money, which they shouldn't have to do. You should be able to go, this is a good game, and it's on early access. Give these people money to make it better. In theory, that's how early access should work. And it's possible that Good Old Games might actually be able to do that. This is my segue back on topic. It's only taken me 20 minutes. Good Old Games might actually be able to do that. Because at least with the old games, the thing that Steam has failed to do, Good Old Games have put their hands on the table. They're putting their cards down, and they're going, look, bitches, right? We're going to sell you an old game, and it's going to fucking work. And if it requires some crazy, insane, burned CD package, we're going to give it to you in a way that's easier. If it's got a widescreen patch, it's going to come with the widescreen mod patch. You know, it's going to be DRM free. It's going to be, you're going to get benefits to buying it here. It's a very good way of doing your business because it solves a lot of the issues that people have with buying very, very old games. It gives you the information required to make sure that your game, the game that you plan on buying, is actually going to run on your modern system. Whereas Steam just gives you a bunch of warning labels about Fallout 3. It's not compatible with Windows 7, except for some people it is. And for some people it isn't. For some people it requires mod. You need to go in and mod it. For some people that mod doesn't work. So it becomes incredibly, you've got to troll through a lot of the shit. Good Old Games, at the very least, attempt to do a good chunk of that work for you. So that little bit of curation, that little bit of extra effort means I'm actually looking forward to seeing how Good Old Games do the early access system. Because if they can take that ethic of ensuring that the game is functional, that even when it's in an early access state, and saying, look, we're going to make sure, in theory, it's not out yet, but what they're saying is we're going to put in a system where we're going to make sure that even if it's an early access, that what you're getting is a functional product. It's got to be at least functional. It's got to be worth your fucking money, so that you can't get debacles like, is it Earth 2066? I would recommend people go to Jim Sterling's channel and look at the video that he posted. Just look at the video of when he played that game. It was atrocious, and that game was charging, what, £20? £20! And the Steam gave them the okay for that. They was, yeah, you can charge £20 for a game that, if you press left click, will shake your screen so violently your computer will fall off a table in Taiwan. That's right, it will vibrate and jump to Taiwan to fall off a table there. And if you're already in Taiwan, it'll probably just catch fire and kill your children. It was horrendous. Jesus Christ. Like, this is the kind of gaming industry we live in, where the idea of helping to fund a game that we want to play is somehow seen upon as a bad idea because of the implementation of one fucking company, being Valve with Steam. Their singular there are thousands of I'm sure everyone's heard of some, like, Flash game that got kickstarted that got on Steam, or it got in through Greenlight and it was fine, like, and it was a good game, or it was at least an okay game. It might not have, it's not like some crazy AAA 10 out of 10 malarkey, but it was at least an okay game. Everyone can pull on a bunch of examples of games where that's been the case. And yet, when it comes into early access, somehow those numbers are so much lower. Because apparently early access seems to have built up this stigma where if it's on early access, I won't buy it. And I say apparently, I won't buy it. The only time I buy something on early access now is if I've bought something from that company beforehand. Like, I played Endless Space. I liked Endless Space, especially when they patched most of the bugs out of it and it was actually playable for the most part, and it was enjoyable, and I could sit down and it was play it and I could get some enjoyment out of that, and it was a pretty good 4X game for the most part. There's still some problems that I've got with it. There's still some issues. Multiplayer's still a bit iffy. But they came out and they went, we're going to make Endless Legend. It's on early access. We're going to use this early access system as an implementation of the Games Together system that we'd already used for our previous titles. It was effectively allowing them to bring to Steam the system that originally they were doing privately on their own website, where they didn't get anywhere near as much traction as they might have done on the Steam page, on Steam pages where people spend every minute of their gaming bloody lives, unless it's some exclusive to Origin or Uplay, God forbid. And for the most part, there's no real Uplay exclusives. Most of the time it's on Steam as well. So even then, it's just Origin. As long as it's not an Origin exclusive, there's a good chance you're putting it on Steam. And even if it is an Origin exclusive, you can put it in through Steam anyway, as long as you buy it on Origin. God forbid you've installed that pile of shit for anything longer than you need to, which is a shame, because a lot of the things like the refund policies that EA have are actually quite a lot better. It's just a shame Origin is a pain in the arse to use. See, I told you we could get something interesting out of this, 2 stories. Apparently I've been sitting here for 4,000 years talking about those 2 stories. So I'm going to sit here and edit this and maybe find something interesting for you guys to watch over the top of this. And hopefully, maybe, probably not, I'll see you guys for another one of these, because I quite like talking about my opinions on the things that I do in my spare time. Bye!